For 67 years, it was Australia's greatest maritime mystery, the sudden total loss of HMAS Sydney and all 645 crew. It was the largest single loss of life in Royal Australian Navy history, over a third of all deaths in the war. The official story said a German raider sank her in a fierce battle, but whispers of conspiracy, cover-ups, and third-party involvement persisted, including claims of Japanese submarines and survivor massacres. The truth lay 2,500 meters below the surface, sealed in silence, waiting for technology to catch up. In 2008, a team led by David Mearns located the wreck off Shark Bay. The answer begins with a phantom. The hunter and the ghost took shape long before the first shot. The German raider Kormoran was a masterpiece of deception, a heavily armed wolf disguised as the Dutch merchant vessel Straat Malacca. Its commander, Fregattenkapitein Theodor Detmers, only 38 and the youngest of the raider captains, understood the psychology of sea policing. He relied on the rules that compelled a warship like Sydney to close and confirm identity. That protocol was the raider's sharpest weapon. Kormoran carried hidden firepower, 6 5.9-inch guns, torpedo tubes, and batteries of light weapons concealed behind false hull plates and cargo hatch walls. She could scatter mines if needed, but her greatest strength was the mask, an ensign, a call sign, and the calm posture of a civilian freighter. On November 19, 1941, Captain Joseph Burnett of Sydney did what doctrine demanded when a silhouette resolved on the horizon. He altered course, reduced the gap, and challenged the stranger's identity. He believed he was dealing with a merchantman. He was edging into a prepared kill zone. The exchange that followed was a quiet duel of signals and patience. Sydney asked for identification. Kormoran answered slowly, buying time. The Dutch ensign flew. The call sign for Straat Malacca, PKQI, went up. Each step was designed to soothe suspicion and draw the cruiser closer, where concealment could be dropped and heavy guns could do their work at point-blank range. This was the tactical genius of the raider concept. With civilian silhouettes and hidden armament, ships like Kormoran forced the Royal Navy and its allies to scatter attention and escorts across oceans. By the end of 1940, Britain had pressed over 100 liners into service as armed merchant cruisers, resources diverted to hunt ghosts rather than fight fleet actions. As the distance narrowed to under a mile, tension compressed into seconds. Sydney continued to demand clarity. Kormoran complied just enough, keeping the facade intact. Below those false plates, crews stood ready at guns and torpedo rooms, sights laid, fuses set. Detmers waited for the moment when protocol had done his work for him. What happened next did not begin with a single trigger pull, but with a sequence that turned caution into catastrophe. The mask was about to come off. 30 minutes of fire began in a confined stretch of ocean at pistol-shot range. After a drawn-out exchange of signals, Kormoran hauled down the Dutch colors and ran up the German war ensign. Concealed guns swung clear. Torpedo doors opened. The first shots came almost together. Later, Australian interrogators judged the German accounts broadly truthful and consistent. Sydney's opening 8-gun salvo went high. Some shells cut through Kormoran's funnel and wireless office without detonating, splashing down beyond. Kormoran's reply found its mark. A tight burst demolished Sydney's bridge and smashed the gunnery control. German survivors later reported seeing men falling from the shattered bridge and superstructure. With the director silenced and communications broken, Sydney's forward turrets lost their edge. Rapid follow-up fire hit hard, jamming or wrecking A and B turrets before they could settle and fire again. A hit at the waterline near the forward engine room fed fires that began to climb through the ship. Early in the action, Kormoran loosed 2 torpedoes. Around the 8th or 9th salvo, one struck just forward of A turret, near the ASDIC compartment. The bow sagged. Sydney heeled and turned hard to port. Another heavy hit tore at the forward turret's housings, peeling armor and throwing debris across the forecastle. Crippled but not mute, Sydney brought her aft turrets into play. A few rounds went out, but with the bridge gone and spotting obscured by smoke, their effect was limited. By about 1735, the main exchange had ebbed. Fires burned in the engine spaces, around the aircraft catapult, and throughout the forward superstructure. Kormoran stopped firing in salvos, but her aft guns kept up single, harassing shots as Sydney crossed the raider's stern. Around 1745, Sydney fired 2 torpedoes from her starboard tubes. They ran past Kormoran's stern without effect. The distance opened. Near 10,000 meters apart, both ships were burning. Sydney headed south-southeast, slowing, her silhouette fading into smoke. She slipped beyond German sight, though her glow hung on the horizon for hours. At 1825, with firefighting systems crippled and flames threatening the magazines and mine hold, Detmers ordered Kormoran abandoned. Boats and rafts went over by 2100. The raider was left at midnight and sank after the mine hold exploded. 317 of Kormoran's crew survived. Sydney and her 645 men vanished into the deep, leaving behind unanswered questions that would persist until the sea itself could speak. What the sea kept, it finally returned as the silent witnesses. The debate over the battle's true events raged for 67 years, a war of words fought in official inquiries and history books. Then, in March 2008, the deep sea gave up its evidence. The discovery of the wrecks was a forensic breakthrough, and it aligned, point for point, with what Kormoran's survivors had testified under interrogation in 1941. The search was led by shipwreck hunter David Mearns, who persuaded the Australian Navy believed that a search anchored to the German reported positions and primary documents would work. Following the location of Kormoran, his team used the raider's position and German accounts of Sydney's last bearing to calculate a 20 by 18 nautical mile search box. On March 17, 2008, shortly after 11 a.m., they found the Australian cruiser at a depth of 2,468 meters. The wreck lay upright on the seabed with a catastrophic injury. The bow was completely severed from the main hull. That detached section rested within the debris field, about 500 meters to the northwest. This was not damage from a long-range artillery duel. The complete separation of the bow indicated a massive internal explosion, consistent with a torpedo hit detonating a forward magazine. Cameras sent down by a remotely operated vehicle revealed the rest. The superstructure and bridge were obliterated. The forward gun turrets mangled and mute, their barrels fixed into the dark. Scars across the hull traced shell impacts at close range. The debris field told a coherent story of rapid flooding forward, progressive fires, and a ship losing command and control in minutes. It was a near-perfect match to the German descriptions of a close-range, high-intensity exchange. The wrecks became more than evidence. They were protected places. Both sites were declared protected under the Historic Shipwrecks Act, 1976, and added to the Australian National Heritage List in 2011, recognized as war graves and safeguarded from disturbance. The long wait for answers was over. Steel, rupture lines, and the quiet geometry of a debris field settled decades of argument. Yet even with the macro-level truth secured on the seabed, another thread remained. A single artifact that carried the loss from ship-sized facts to a human face. A name from the deep begins with a single life raft and an unknown sailor. Months after the sinking, a Carly float washed ashore on Christmas Island. Inside was one body. For decades, this raft was a point of contention and a magnet for conspiracy theories. A post-war RAN assessment judged the float inconsistent with standard Australian specifications, and some argued it was German. Later analyses challenged that view. In 1999, the Joint Standing Committee on Foreign Affairs, Defense, and Trade concluded, on the balance of probability, that both the body and the Carley float were most likely from HMAS Sydney. The remains carried more than rumor. Examiners found a metal fragment embedded in the skull, identified as German shell shrapnel. That wound spoke plainly. The sailor died from battle injuries, not from any alleged massacre. The raft and the fragment narrowed the possibilities to one ship and one fight. In 2021, advanced DNA testing finally provided a name. On November 19, 2021, exactly 80 years after the battle, the sailor was identified as able seaman Thomas Welsby Clark of HMAS Sydney. The timing was stark. After 8 decades, the date itself closed a circle. The forensic process was deliberate. Researchers from the Australian National University and the University of Adelaide extracted DNA from a tooth. To confirm identity, they needed a living relative. The search led to Clark's nephew, Gerald Clark, whose sample provided a conclusive mitochondrial DNA match. With that, the anonymous sailor had a family, a hometown, and a record. Thomas Welsby Clark was 20 years old, approaching 21. He served as a radar operator aboard Sydney. His service number was S4898, the fact that his body was found in a Carley. The float suggests he escaped the ship as it vanished into the deep, only to succumb to wounds, exposure, or dehydration in the Indian Ocean. He survived the blast and fire long enough to reach a raft, but help never came. This identification did more than settle a debate. It turned a symbol into a person and anchored national grief to a single life. From steel on the seabed to a name on a memorial, the arc of evidence restored dignity and certainty. What followed would speak to resolution, not of a war, but of a question that had lingered for generations. What came next was the conclusion long denied by distance and doubt. The discovery of HMAS Sydney did not alter the course of the war, but it delivered closure. The silent evidence on the seabed matched the German survivor accounts and ended decades of conspiracy theories. Families who had waited 67 years finally had answers grounded in physical fact. Following their discovery, both wrecks were placed under the protection of the Historic Shipwrecks Act 1976 and added to the Australian national heritage.